Thank you all for coming to Bookends tonight. As an independent bookstore, we are especially proud of supporting local independent authors instead of all those big name people. Although someday you'll be one of those big name people, we hope, right? I have to say that I first met LS 2 years ago at the Steampunk Festival in Waltham, and read her first book. I really enjoyed it, so I'm really happy to be able to welcome her back. This new book, The Clothes That Make You, is set in the 1960s, a period that I sort of remember. It was very interesting. I opened to a place in the bookmark. Well, it was something about tripping. Brought back a few memories. Anyway, without further ado, I will turn over to Ellis. Thank you again for coming. If you do need to pick up a copy of the book, we have them at the register. You can pick them up after the talk. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Bookends for hosting me again for this. I hate public speaking. I've had stomach pains about this all day, so just FYI. So what I'll do is I will give a little intro about the book, and then I will read a scene, and I will open up for question and answer period, and then I'll sign copies if anyone wants their copies signed. So a little bit about the book. So for any of you who are familiar with my first novel, The Petruvian Heir, that's set in sort of a nightmarish neo-Victorian version of the United States in the future, where natural disasters and fear-based voting has led to, democracy to end, and has turned the country into a dictatorial monarchy with heavy theocratic undertones. Women have lost their rights, the poor are disenfranchised, and there's an elite ruling class. This book is totally different. It is set in the 1960s, 1967 to be exact, in New England suburbia. And it follows the coming of age of a girl named Sally Fiore, and she's sort of a shy high school misfit who's just lost her father. And she's coping with, her very stoic mother, who is trying to be strong for everyone and move on, and goes to work at the local laundry and dry cleaners to make ends meet and put her 2 children through college. She's dealing with an older brother who's like a popular football star who is dead set on enlisting in the Army after graduation. And she's also dealing with a tenacious would-be boyfriend and mean girls at school. So she turns to comfort in the small things and in the familiar, like her beloved classic novels. She develops a new passion for sewing and making her own clothes. And she develops an interest in the handsome young custodian at her school, who always has a book in his back pocket, and who she notices is wearing her dead father's shoes that her mother had recently given to the local thrift. So, again, completely a departure. Her life really changes in January of '68 when she makes an unlikely friend in a new girl at school whose name is Sam. And Sam dresses like a boy. She prefers to date girls, and she's defiantly unapologetic about her differences. So this friendship with Sam really helps Sally blossom and come into her own. So it's really a coming-of-age story and a year in the life of a young girl as she develops. So how did I come up with this idea? I was thinking about that today because I sort of forgot. And it came to me in fragments, I guess, which is kind of the way I end up working. The first fragment was I had thought about writing a short story addressing the idea, I was wondering one day, a person that you love passes on and you have all their things. And you eventually need to get rid of those things. And so you give them to a store, you donate them or whatever. And I always thought, what if, I saw someone wearing the clothes of someone that I had loved who had died? How would I feel about that? So I thought of the story, maybe I'll make a story about, a girl who's lost her father, and she sees this homeless man wearing his shirt, and she decides to befriend him, and it's like that kind of story. It manifested as something different in this book, but that was my initial thought. And then, I guess, the era of the 60s. If anyone knows me, I'm a huge throwback. I will wear a Peter Pan collar above anything else. And I love the decade. I think it's really a volatile period for this country. So much happened. Vietnam was happening. There was civil unrest. The civil rights movement was happening. There was the nugget that would form, the aggressive, more women's lib that would happen in the 70s. We landed on the moon. All of these different things were going on. And I was also a huge diehard fan of Mad Men. And when it ended, I was like, damn it, I can't just sit around and pine in my vintage cardigans. I need to write a novel set this time, so I can throw myself into research. And also, the character Sam was a character who had come into my head, based actually, so my real life inspiration for Sam is my friend John Leahy's sister Patty. Her face is actually on the cover right here in the bottom corner. Patty is just, I met her and I just loved her immediately. She's the life of the party. She's this vibrant spirit who doesn't care what anyone thinks, and she's just completely herself. And I sat down and talked with her, and I'm getting parched. I sat down and I talked with her, and just about how it is being herself and dressing the way she does. She'll wear the bow tie, she has the pompadour hair, and talking to her about that, because I wanted to write I wanted to imbue her spirit in this character, but I wanted to write a really authentic character. And she's like, she'd come out to her family, I think in high school, but up until a couple of years ago, she still had the kind of shoulder-length hair, and she said, I just didn't feel like myself. She's like, I wasn't being a proud lesbian. She's like, I just wanted to cut my hair off and dress the way I dressed, so she did it. And I also asked her, how did you know growing up? How did you know that you felt this way about girls? And what she said, I actually took verbatim and put in the book. She said it was the movies. When I would watch a movie, she said I would, the girl in the movie would be having some romantic issue, and I would think, I could treat her way better than that guy. I could be the guy. So, and the other thing about Sam's character is, my own self, growing up, I was in a million plays with these people in the front row, and I just didn't care. I would be on stage, and I would be like, yes, here I am. I'm awesome, look at me. And as I get older, I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of things wrong with me. People are gonna notice, because I'm noticing. And I started getting really insecure and self-conscious, and today, I didn't want to do this, because I'm like, oh god, I'm gonna get up there and make a fool out of myself. But again, writing the character Sam, who just doesn't care, she's, loving life, not thinking about what others are thinking of her. I wrote that character to kind of give myself, help myself get out of this, whatever I'm in, as an older person. I think I'm moving, I'm 37, so I'm getting to a point where I'm getting old enough to really, start not caring again. I think when you go through kind of peaks, you're young, you don't care, and then you kind of go through this middle stage of life, and then you get old, and you're like, well, whatever now. So I feel myself getting to that point. And also, I wrote it for my mother, who's in the front row. There we are. My mother, my protagonist, lost her father at 17. He died of a heart attack. He was a mailman, as in the book. And her mother, my grandmother, like the mother in the book, Lorraine, she went to work at the dry clean and the laundry so she could put my mom through college and keep the house. So I thought, I guess all those fragments came together and made this story. So I was like, well, I'm just going to write it. And I set it in the real town of Wakefield. I could have set it in a fictional New England town, but I grew up in Wakefield, and I know a lot about the town during that time because my mom grew up there, and I felt like it will be really authentic. I'll be able to dive into and I do love the research part of it. And so I dove into more research, and I just found a lot of really good tidbits to use. And things like, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Wakefield, but there's the lake, and in the 60s, you know, I went to the Wakefield community group on Facebook, and I said to them, you know, anyone here in the 60s remember what it was like? Tell me, because I'm writing a book, and people wrote back with a ton of very usable stuff. You know, kids used to hang out on the BB library wall, like that's the place that everyone went Friday night. They hung it on the wall and loitered, and people would drive up Main Street and like cruise by and see what was going on. There was a boathouse on the lake, which I wish was still there, where they used to have dances. There was a place called Pleasure Island that was pegged as the Disney World of the East. Like, they thought it was going to be this big, huge thing. There was, like, a Moby Dick ride where this whale came out of the water, and, like, it was, like, this automated whale. All these famous performers came and performed. But it really only lasted about 10 or so years, 20 years maybe?
I think it's that long.
15 years maybe? And it was, I guess, just too cold in the winters here for it to really take hold of what it tried to be. So now there's just weird remnant, like now it's a business park, and there's like the weird skeleton of the whale, like the mud is gone. And there was also, you know, my favorite place was the Colonial Spa, and it was still there. It was there in the 60s, and it was there when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, and the Clapes family ran it. And so in the 60s, when this book was made, it would have been the grandfather who was running it. And in the 80s and 90s, his nephew Alex Clapes, who I knew, was a lovely, lovely man, and he was running it. Just your old, like, tile, like, mosaic tile floor, soda counter with candy, and it was my favorite place. And also, I found out some other things. So, on October 29th of 1967, there was a rally in downtown Wakefield in support of the Vietnam War, in support of the troops, which is very, like, opposite of the rallies that were happening. Most of them were in protest of the war. This one was to support the troops. And there are pictures of it online. There were almost, like, the police reported the crowd was almost 25,000 people on the Common, and if you've seen Wakefield Common, it's not super big. So it was just jam-packed, and there's a picture online. There were a lot of bikers there, and there's a long-haired biker with, like, a bandana, and he's holding an American flag, and people are hoisting him up. And it's just like, so I worked that into the book. Like, Sally and her brother ended up going to that, and that's when she realizes her brother's going to enlist, because she just sees the look on his face. And another funny tidbit that I've discovered, and I was living in East Boston a couple years ago when I started writing this, and I was taking an Uber home, and I get super chatty with the cab drivers. And this cab driver happens to be from the Wakefield area, and he was like, I must have been telling him about my book or something, but he said, I used to work at a restaurant called Hazelwood Cottage that was there. He was like, in the late 60s, early 70s, he's like, they're famous for their chicken croquettes. So I was like, I'm going to put that in the book. So just whatever I could do to make it authentic. And I also looked up, you know, I mean, I did a lot of research on clothes, because there's heavy, you know, wording about people's outfits, because Sally's making her own clothes, and it's her thing. I also did a lot of research about just the products people were using at the time. The Pond's moisturizer that my grandma used that I still use. I love Pond's. They're not paying me to say that, but I still use the $3.99 dollar jar of Pond's sometimes. And like colognes, like Old Spice. Like, what cologne were to follow me wearing? Old Spice, obviously, right? But just little things like that. And I got really into YouTube at certain points, like almost to the point of obsession. But for instance, there's one scene where her friend is reading a 17 magazine, and it's May. And I'm like, okay, well, what article would she actually been reading in the May 1968 issue of 17 magazine? So I looked up, and there was an article, Who Would Date a Girl Like Me? And so I'm like, okay, well, she's going to be reading that. Just like as much of truth as I could put in it, I did. So, and I guess one last thing I'll say is, while I was writing this, I started thinking, you know, I'm setting this is like a microcosm of a girl in a small town, like living through this era that was so big, and all these things that were going on, the war, the civil unrest, the social issues, the, you know, repression and the inequality, and she's dealing with things like bullying, and there's gender issues, and there's sexuality issues, and I said, this could be set in 2017, because that's really a little bit frightening to me. With the first book I wrote, I was kind of, you know, I wanted to shine a light on the future. And if we stay this course that we're currently in, societies can absolutely regress. It's happened in other countries already where people have lost their rights. And, I kind of wanted to address with that, what would happen if we stay this course and we get to this kind of very radical point. And with this book, I'm kind of trying to hold a mirror up to the past, saying, okay, well, it's 50 years later and we're still dealing with some of these issues. Like, this is still relevant. And what does that say about us? And not, I'm not here to get political or to push an agenda on anyone, but I do write these books to create a dialogue. So my question is, what does that say about us? For me, I'm wondering, if we're still dealing, of course there's forward progress. Of course we've made progress. But if we're still seeing these issues resurface, maybe we're not evolving at the same speed as the technology around us. And that's a little scary to me, too. Anyway, mull that over, and I will read a scene from the book. I will set the scene. This is probably a very pivotal scene. It's in chapter 3, and it's the first time that Sally meets Sam. And it's actually, so they become friends in January when Sam starts as the new girl in school, but this scene takes place in December, and it's actually, so Sam's parents are very wealthy, well-to-do people. Her father is a renowned judge in Cambridge, and they've moved to this smaller suburb, kind of for Sam's sake, because there had been like an incident at her private school, and she was sort of asked to leave. And so they felt like maybe small town life would calm her down a little more. So they moved into this house, and if anyone's here's from Wakefield, I was thinking halfway down the lake, that big, white, beautiful house on the corner with the 2 porches and the little cupola on top. That's the house that I was thinking. And so they move in December, and they want to have like a Christmas party to introduce themselves to their neighbors and to meet their neighbors. And Sally's mother happens to be a very amazing cook, as my grandmother was in real life. And someone mentions her name, as someone who could maybe cater the party, and a widow who needs the money, so they hire her to do it. And she takes her sister, Jo, who I didn't even bother masking the names as I wrote this. So my grandmother had 3 sisters, Catherine, Jo, and Sally. So I took Sally's name from my main character, and I just kept Catherine and Jo, and the other one I called Marion, because that's my grandmother's sister-in-law. So she takes her sister Jo, who's a feisty sort, and her Jo's son Nick, who, again, based on my friend Nick, didn't bother to change the name. Whatever, don't sue me. So Sally is right now in the kitchen waiting for the garlic bread to get out of the oven, and she sees, she ends up interacting with Sam. Sally rested for a minute against the counter, one eye on the oven and one on the wide kitchen window where outside the snow fell softly and silently, casting a sparkling incandescence across the lawn. It couldn't have been a more perfect welcome for the guests who would soon be carefully making their way up the front walk. Aunt Jo poked her curled raven head around the corner. "Sally, doll, your mother needs extra toothpicks for the past hors d'oeuvres, and Nick is asking for more maraschinos and grenadine. Grab those from the pantry while you wait on that last tray of garlic bread, will you?" Sally nodded and forced herself to move, pushing with her palms against the edge of the counter to launch her body forward. She had to hand it to her godmother for being such a master delegator. Next to the refrigerator was a small alcove that served as a pantry. It had shuttered doors, the same golden knotty wood as the rest of the space. While she knelt there, sifting through the paper bags of their supplies, harsh voices trickled down the stairs across the room that led to the kitchen from the second floor. Sally peered out of the pantry to have a look. Angry footsteps descended and attached themselves to a startlingly dapper teenage boy. He wore a cream-colored dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a forest green sweater vest, dark wool pants, and a cranberry bow tie with cream dots. His hair was cut short around, except for a lively pompadour on top, and he defiantly smoked a cigarette while he paused to lean on the banister and address the other person. "What have you done to yourself? You can't do this to us. You can't be at the party like this," the upstairs voice pleaded. A gauzy lamplight sifted down and illuminated the boy's face. It was a delicate face with wide eyes, a slender nose, and a pert mouth that now set itself in a smirk in contrast to the otherwise fraught look Sally could place in his furrowed brow. A deep pain rooted itself behind the dark eyes, just subtle enough to go unnoticed with the right bravado in front of it. "What's wrong with the way I look? I'm comfortable," he stated flatly. "I laid your clothes out for you, and your hair. It's all in the sink." the tremulous voice argued, growing more desperate with each word. You didn't even bother cleaning it out after you mutilated yourself. Well, sorry, I'll clean it now. Never mind that, I already did. But people will be here soon and you need to change. I don't know what can be done about your hair. I'm not changing. At this time, the boy looked over and met Sally's gaze. She froze. He pretended not to notice her and resumed his battle. There's nothing wrong with my outfit. If your father sees you like that. Like what? The boy now grew cross and stood a little more defensively, his hand gripping the banister and his other dangling with the cigarette by his side. The voice didn't answer at first, then said almost inaudibly, Why are you doing this to us? We moved here for your sake. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just being myself. But that's the problem. It's always about what you and other people think. It's never about me, is it? It's fine, Mother. I'll put on your stupid outfit so you don't have to be humiliated at your first party. He winked at Sally, took a drag from his cigarette, and climbed back upstairs. The owner of the voice hurried down from the opposite direction and peered into the kitchen, mortified at a witness to the argument. She sighed and came down the rest of the way. Doris Pettifer was an attractive woman in her late 40s, tall and graceful with a blonde coiffure and a beige satin dress. The double strand of pearls knotted down her front was undoubtedly genuine. I'm sorry. I should have figured someone would be in here. Sally, is it? Sally set down the toothpicks and cherries and stood quickly, jutting out her hand. Doris took it. Yes, I'm Mrs. Fiore's daughter. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. I have to say, the house smells wonderful. We've heard plenty about your mother's cooking, and we hope our guests will enjoy it. She's done her best, so I think they will. Doris frowned, and you'll have to excuse us for the outburst you just overheard. She smiled and tried to make light of it. You teenagers, always rebelling. Is something burning? Oh, the garlic bread. Sally hastened to the oven. She threw on her mother's quilted floral mitt and pulled out the aromatic bread, now slightly charred around the edges. Oh, she's going to kill me. It looks fine to me. Technically it's fine, but you don't know my mother. She's a perfectionist. Doll, where are those things? Her aunt stuck her head in again, and seeing the mistress of the house there, decided to come in the full way. She shook her pretty head over the garlic bread. Oh, wait until your mother sees that. You can tell her it was my fault, Doris interjected. I was having an argument with my child on the stairs, and it must have been a huge distraction for her. Aunt Jo gave this woman the same once over, only Sally assumed she was devising a slightly snarkier opinion of Mrs. Doris Pettifer. She could tell by the shrewdness dancing in her aunt's black eyes. That's so, she said. Another set of heels reverberated on the stairs, and a heavenly being emerged, wearing the most beautiful emerald party dress, bearing alabaster shoulders, and with a creamy tulle petticoat peeking out from beneath it. Her delicate face was accentuated with a rosy lip, and her hair was combed down into an elegant pixie style evocative of Audrey Hepburn. Sally almost dropped the tray of garlic bread when she realized it was the same young person as before. This young woman reluctantly flounced over to them as her mother cooed, There, now that's so much better, and I even like your hair like this, it suits you. The girl glared at her from under a thick fringe of lashes, but no longer protested. Doris turned to Sally and her aunt. This is my daughter, Samantha. It's Sam, her daughter corrected. Doris laughed nervously and squeezed Sam's shoulders. I'm going to go see how everything is looking, she said in overly cheerful intonations, sweeping out of the room. I'll take these. Aunt Jo picked up the needed items from the pantry floor and followed, leaving Sam and Sally alone. She half smiled as she spied the tray in Sally's hands. Looks like you burned the bread. In spite of the garlic bread, which garnered a look of slight consternation from Lorraine, the party was a success. The house, still warmly lit and glittering with its holiday festoons, left a pleasant imprint in the memories of the guests as they departed in a languor of satiated merriment. Lorraine glowed under the praise of Judge and Mrs. Pettifer as they presented her with a tight wad of cash for her efforts and a $100 tip, of which she generously gave Sally, Nick, and Joe $30 each, keeping only $10 extra for herself. Aunt Jo held her finger to her lips for Sally to keep quiet as she snuck her share back into Lorraine's purse. She then glared at her son until he mimicked the gesture. Sally followed suit with her own tip, and before her mother caught on, Aunt Jo distracted her with goodbyes and congratulations. Sally let Nick continue nursing a leftover cookie and started taking the garbage out back. As she was hoisting 2 large bags into some empty cans, she heard a footstep crunch in the snow behind her. It was Sam. She had a fancy wool coat draped over her shoulders. It was a deep berry with black piping and a black fur collar and cuffs. Against her ivory skin, the berry and emerald tones were like jewels in the snow. It was arresting. She smiled and lit a cigarette. So you go to the high school, I hear? You hear correctly. Sally shoved the lids on the cans and then stood facing this enviably dressed girl, unsure yet what to make of her. She didn't quite understand how anyone gifted with such a stunning wardrobe should prefer boys' clothes, but it seemed more complicated than just a matter of style. I'll be starting in the new year, Sam said, looking out into the yard. Maybe we can hang out, if you don't mind. I wouldn't, but I'm not popular or anything, kind of the opposite, if you don't mind that. Sam looked at her with a raised brow. Popular? Really? Is that a thing in this town? I mean, isn't it kind of a thing everywhere? Only if people allow it. That's what everything comes down to, what people allow, what they tolerate. You know there was a war going on out there. She nodded out to the immediate landscape for lack of a better gesture. I know, Sally snapped. I watch the news and read the paper just like everyone else. My point is, there are more important things to worry about than trifles like who has the most friends and the best clothes. I think you'd win in the clothes department. Sam snorted. I won't be dressing like this, that's for sure. What's wrong with these clothes? Sally asked, trying to sound innocent so she wouldn't sound ignorant. These clothes. This dress is a Sarmy of New York. Most of my other pieces are custom made. My mother's commissioned the best designer in Boston to make me an entire new wardrobe for school, but I'm not wearing any of it. I'll change in the bathroom if I have to. These clothes, she said, fingering the shiny silk of her dress. These clothes just make me feel foreign in my own body. That's all. Like a tourist in my skin. And I don't like that. I prefer to be comfortable at all times. To just be myself. Sally looked her over once more. Maybe she was one of those girls like her mother had told her about, the kind of girls who like other girls. She supposed it didn't matter much. I think that's fine. If there's any place in the world you should be able to be yourself, then I guess it's here. I guess. But here isn't perfect. Here is far from it. Sally could see Nick waving her inside through the French glass doors of the dining room. It looks like I'm being summoned to leave. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you next year, Sam smiled. Happy New Year. She nodded, and Sally left her outside on the back patio, blowing smoke circles into the frigid night air. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Someone. Oh, sure. Yeah, my nose is running out.
How long did it take to write it?
I took maybe, well, I think about things a long time before I start writing. Maybe in total about like a year and a half. Yeah, from first writing to, and I guess I started thinking about it when I was still finishing up the other one, so maybe like 2 years total. Thinking about it and then writing it and then producing it.
And do you, when you write, does it just flow, or do you have a lot of different rip up the paper and start again?
No, I don't have a rip up the paper and start again, but I'm really bad. I don't write every day like I should. I can only really write when I'm feeling really inspired. Otherwise, I feel like I'm forcing it, and it never comes out good when I force it. So I write very sporadically. So I'll write 20 or 30 pages in a sitting, but I can't bring myself to write every day. Sometimes I would go weeks without writing anything.
And do you reread, and then add, or?
I do. So I like to start out writing by hand on paper, like just the first few pages of the book. Then I type it into the computer and get going. I don't like typing on a blank computer screen. I have to like write something first and have something to put in. But I have to kind of be away from it a while before I can edit it, because I do self-edit and it's hard. So I will finish a draft of the book. I mean, I'll go back and kind of reread the chapters and kind of edit while I'm doing it as well. But then I'll have to put the book down for like a month or so before I can go back and look at it again after I'm done. Or because you're just too close to it and you don't see things. Like even now, this is the beauty of print on demand. I keep finding little nitpicky things and I'm like, shh. So I would call my designer, I'm like, Liz, there's a comma where it shouldn't be a comma. No comma should be where this comma is. She's like, okay. She fixes it and then re-uploads it, and so then it's fine. But yeah, no, I keep finding little things, and I haven't found anything major. But again, when I was looking for a part to read, I kept finding things. It's like never done.
You have to walk away.
I know. It's like, hey, the story is the same. So
I didn't realize this till you said it, but 67 is 50 years ago now.
Yes.
Was that intentional, or was that more coincidental?
Kind of. Yeah. Let's say it was. I just like that year. I don't know why. And then I think I found that rally happened, and I wanted to put that in, and that just happened to be in there. Plus, I did also want to address, like, so Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated during the book, and I wanted that to be part of it, so it made sense.
In your research, what was the thing that, did you come across, I'm sure that rally, but were there other things that surprised you, or you just thought, wow, this happened in my town, or I didn't know about that, or?
I just, I think of Wakefield today, and it makes me a little sad because there's like the dollar store, and there's some other blocks that are now kind of unattractive eyesores. And I think when I was in the town, like in the 80s and 90s, I grew up. We lived with my grandmother in her house, and my grandmother would go to the hair salon every Thursday, Mary's Beauty Shop with 2 P's and an E. Mary's Beauty Shop on Elkin Street. And like my mom and I would, like after school, my mom would pick me up and we would kind of do errands until we picked up my grandma. And there was a Royal Discount Books, and we would go in there, and every week my mom would like buy me any paperbacks, some Jane Austen or whatever, that I would be like, yeah, I'm gonna read this. And Colonial Spa was there, and I just like, I have so many, like, as I get older, I was like, get me out of this town, like there's nothing here, I hate it. And so I was determined to leave. Now I look back and I'm very nostalgic, but I think in the 60s, as I was doing this research, it just seems so idyllic. Like, even though the period itself was very fraught with, all this stuff going on, but our town was just like, people were like, the bandstand, there's like this gazebo on the common, and bands would play in the summer, and people would go picnic and be with their kids on the lawn of the common, and there was, I don't know, it seems, there are all these mom and pop stores, like Park Snow was where Klein's used to be, which is now Lano, and there's J.J. Newberry's, there was a Woolworths, the movie theater block had a movie theater, it was like a nickel matinee, so it just seems really idyllic. And like one other thing too that someone said, Colonial Spa was known for its raspberry lime Rickies, and someone on the Wakefield community group said, when I went there, Mr. Clapes told me that the raspberry syrup for those Rickies was made from raspberries from his family's garden on Avon Street. And I was like, what a raspberry lime Ricky! So yeah, just like little things like that. I don't know. It made me appreciate our town, I guess. More.
In 1968, that was the centennial, right, of Wakefield? Because
I get very confused with that because we had our 350th celebration, right, when we performed.
But it was from Reading, right, when it broke up?
Yeah, I
from
can't
Reading?
get a good determination on when it's counted as like the Wakefield anniversary because
Yeah.
it did used to be Reading before it was.
How did you decide on sewing and clothes being, does it just have to do with how much that helps you find your identity and what clothes can mean to people? Like what was it that made you zero in? Because a girl who's a misfit who likes books could have chosen a lot of quiet things to occupy her time with and to find a thing that so did you feel like it was the relationship between clothes and identity that kind of caused you to zero in on it, or?
I liked that aspect when it happened. I think, so there was a fabric store, Adrian's too. I think it was the necessity of it. So they couldn't afford to go to, and this is too with I don't know if it's true with you, but they were in a position where basically her mother was like, we can't afford these stores anymore. Like, we can't afford, Elizabeth Hines was where you used to shop, right?
Yeah, so it's an Estonian, was it?
Park Snow, and like, we can't afford this. So I thought maybe it would be practical for her to develop a skill where she could like, make embellishments to old clothes that were forgotten, the dry cleaners or something else. And I did think too that it was therapeutic for her.
Sure.
But also, I just like clothes, and all the descriptions of clothes in here are actual clothes, vintage clothes that I would look up online. I would be like, what would she wear? Let me go on Etsy. And I would find something like this coat with black piping and maroon, and try not to buy it for myself. I didn't. But and her prom, when she described her prom dress that she makes, but I found that dress online. It was a vintage dress with it was coral colored with the ruffled tall bust and the I used real descriptions of clothes that I was finding too. But yeah, I'm a huge fashion fan, and I love the fashion of the 60s, which is why I was very sad when Mad Men went off the air, because I loved looking at the clothes in the show.
Yes.
But yeah, I did like that tie-in as it was happening. But I didn't necessarily plan for it. And I did think, about these identities of the people. And originally the cover, I was thinking of making a shot of like 4 narrow strips with her collar and Sam's collar and her brother's collar in fatigues, and then somebody else, because they are really identified by what they were wearing or going to be wearing, and her dad with the mailman's outfit, and just there's a lot of emphasis on that.
Yeah, I just thought that it was one of the things I liked the most about it was how the idea of clothing as a form of self-expression, and not only what you express with it intentionally, but what you express with it unintentionally. And I don't know, I just thought it was one of the parts of the book that I picked up on the most, and all the different ways that it came through was really nicely put together.
Thank you.
What about scenes? Did you have those mapped out in your head before you started, or did they evolve as you wrote, or did you rewrite them? I mean, how did you lay out the sort of structure?
A little of both. Sometimes, so I had like a rough outline of what I figured was going to happen. But sometimes things pop up, like, so I'll say the character of Rose is one of my favorite characters in the book, and she was an accident. She was a character of necessity. I was like, okay, someone needs to be working at this fabric store. It's who she can interact with, and I created this character Rose, who then ends up being a really weighty, supporting character with like a very interesting and sad backstory. So yeah, it's a little of both. I mean, and sometimes like as I'm writing too, I discover I'm like, I don't want to. There's no spoilers in here, but there's something pivotal that happens at the end. And I didn't figure that out until like 3/4 of the way through, and I was like, oh, darn, like obviously this is going to happen. So I wrote it. Anyone else? Yes.
Having now written historical fiction in alternate, future fiction, which process do you like better? Which one do you think you lend yourself better to? Or sorry, hard, difficult, multifaceted question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, okay, the speculative fiction is probably hard. It's hard because you're making stuff up. I mean, although that's kind of easy too if you're like full of crap like me. But it is hard to tie a whole world together like out of your own imagination. And the historical fiction, that was fun because I'm doing research, but I'm still like, am I getting this right? Like, is this how things were? And I talked to as many baby boomers as I could to see if it was feeling like I was. I mean, I was literally Googling what is it like after you smoke pot? Because I swear I have never smoked pot, and I was like, what do you feel like? What is it like inhaling? Like, does it burn? I like didn't know. So I was Googling. I'm like, how is an acid trip? Like, Google everything. So
I'm glad she had to do that.
I guess they're both equal, but I'm not sure which one I liked better. I think now I'm gonna write now I'm in my in-between phase. In between books, I'll write a short story because I just have to like kind of do something new. So I'm writing something set in the present. Like I have another short story that I wrote set in the present that I really love too. So I don't know, maybe my next book will be in the present, but I don't think it's going to be. It's going to be I don't know how to describe it. How do I describe it? It's gonna be an alternate. It's gonna be like parallel world, Earth-like, but not full fantasy. Maybe like
Earth Keepers?
No. It's my first novel. My parents keep talking about it. It's not
We
good.
liked it.
Maybe a civilian.
No, I guess it's like
It's a parallel world.
almost like paranormal, but married to magical realism. If that makes any kind of sense. There's like shapeshifters in it, but then there's also this town that I'm imagining where people are going to have to come together after like a cycle of bigotry, to kind of dispel this cycle of bigotry that's been happening. No, it's not in the present. But yeah, so yeah. Then I have weird other ideas too. They're completely disconnected. Like I don't write in any particular genre. I just kind of write what I have ideas about. I have another book that's set. It's going to be like this legacy Cape Cod home, and the main character is kind of her life's crumbling. Her like kind of perfect life. She's very successful. She's married, well-to-do, and her life starts crumbling. So she wants to kind of go to her grandfather's house for comfort, and he's dying, and then she's also dealing with her kind of mentally ill older cousin who's 40 and like very disruptive basically to her life and what she's trying to do. So there's that, which is completely different. Yeah, I don't know.
So we can expect a lot more books from you.
Hopefully, if I have time, I do work a full-time job.
Okay, question.
Yes.
Have you had other people read the books for you? Like a writing group,
Oh,
or
yeah.
just your friends?
I've had friends read the books. beforehand. I also have a book club that I'm friends with, and they read the books. They've read a draft of this before I published it, and they had some really good feedback that I took into consideration and employed some of their thoughts. And also, my fiance Steve is a very good reader and editor too, so he reads.
Did you make any major changes based on what they told you, or pretty much stayed the same?
I added a few scenes. They really wanted more of Arthur, who's the young custodian in it. They wanted to see kind of more development of him, so I did that. And then I think that was their major thing that they said. And then he gave me some good feedback too about changing the opening sentence of chapter 1. It was different, and Steve recommended. He said you should make it the custodian was wearing her father's shoes, because it's interesting. Like, that's the custodian was wearing her father's old shoes. That was Steve's idea.
Cool.
That's good.
It takes you right into it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you, Steve. Any other questions?
Do you think you'll write another book about Wakefield and maybe in a different time?
I don't know. Maybe. It's funny. A lot of my books, or a lot of my stories. So this other short story that I wrote called Roma, that I haven't published yet. But I think actually that's another thing I have a bunch of short stories that I want to put into a collection. A little bit. Every time I reference a town, it's always like a New Englandy suburb, and there's always a lake. So I think I just automatically imbue, and woods that people go hang out in. I mean, I always try to imbue something of the town, but maybe. Somebody asked me if I was going to write a sequel to this, or like what I thought happened to Sally after. And I personally hope that Sally goes to Paris to study fashion as a young woman. I hope she doesn't settle down and get married. I hope she goes to Europe. Others? Any other questions? Cool. Thank you.